cat is ringing his bell. Right, let's skip the formalities. I have reviewed 3 Harry Potter films so far, so watch those previous videos if you haven't already. Long story short, the way I assess the quality of the Harry Potter films is by looking at the internal plot of the films, my cat is coming over here, plus how those films contribute to the overarching narrative of the series. Alright, there we go, sit on my lap. Yeah. So, starting with the internal plot, we have to ask, what is it about? Well, apparently it is about the Goblet of Fire. And in some sense, yes, in some sense that is true. Harry's name is mysteriously dropped into the goblet, and this causes him to be selected for the Triwizard Tournament, which is the mystery of the film. Why was Harry's name put in the Goblet of Fire? Indeed, at the end we find out that it was put in by a loyal servant of Voldemort who had infiltrated the school. However, this is really just the start of the plot and the end of the plot. What truly matters is the plot itself. How the mystery unfolds and what active steps the protagonists make to discovering what's going on. So shortly after Harry's name is taken out of the Goblet of Fire, Snape suggests the following.
If we are to truly discover the meaning of these events, perhaps we should, for the time being, let them unfold.
Okay, so I'm going to give the internal plot a 0 out of 10. You see, what makes a plot entertaining is seeing the characters exploring the mystery. What makes a plot entertaining is knowing that when we reach the conclusion of a story arc, it's because the characters made choices that got us to this point. In this film, we have a character state that the best approach is just to do nothing and wait to see what happens. And that's what this film is. For 2 hours. Waiting. Nothing happens. Now, in my previous reviews, you could be forgiven for thinking I just recap the plot in a kind of lazy nostalgia critic style. I actually don't like that style of reviewing where you just go through the film sequentially making snide comments and then at the end you give a 2-minute long review, which is often only tangentially related to the first 20 minutes of plain synopsis. The reason why it may seem as if I've done that in the past is because with these action-adventure fantasy films, I like to focus on the plot, and in particular, how the plot unfolds and the way different elements of the plot interact with each other. The reason why it may have seemed for the previous films that I was just listing everything that happened in the film is because in the previous films, almost everything that happened directly related to a wider overarching narrative. In this film, the bulk of the plot is not a plot. It's just things happening. This is why I have referred to this film as Harry Potter and the excuse for a series of meaningless action set pieces, because that's what this film is. Anyway, first of all, I will actually go through every part of the film that does relate to the main plot, but it won't take long. So we'll start off with David Tennant, or as he's known around these parts, the Doctor that isn't as good as Christopher Eccleston. And here's the thing. The plot is just, oh look, there's David Tennant. That's the plot of this film. Oh look, there's David Tennant. Oh look, there's David Tennant. Oh look, there's David Tennant again. Eventually, we find out who David Tennant is. He's Barty Crouch Jr., a servant of Voldemort and the son of Barty Crouch Sr., who dies. His death is kind of just brushed over despite being one of the more interesting things to happen in the film. I love a good murder. Also, he is killed after a rather tense conversation with Mad-Eye Moody, who is in fact Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. So again, this is hinted at throughout the film. Mad-Eye Moody is constantly drinking something, which we are to assume is alcohol of some sort. But meanwhile, Moaning Myrtle mentions Polyjuice Potion, and Snape accuses Harry of brewing Polyjuice Potion. Obviously, somebody is transforming into somebody else, and we find out at the end that it's Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. There is a clever scene where the chest that Mad-Eye Moody is held in moves a bit, which Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise dismisses. The film does attempt some misdirection in an attempt to be interesting. The camera constantly cuts to this headmaster looking evil. It is implied he is a dark wizard, and later we find out he was a Death Eater. In reality, this character literally could not matter less to the plot. Compare this to the Philosopher's Stone, where Snape is shown to be suspicious. In the end, we find out he was actively trying to thwart Quirrell. In the Chamber of Secrets, it's implied that Hagrid might be releasing the monster. In the end, we find out that Tom Riddle was actively misleading Harry. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, we're told that Sirius Black betrayed Harry's parents and now wants to murder him. In the end, we find out he is hunting for the person who truly betrayed Harry's parents. That is to say, in all 3 of these films, there is misdirection regarding who the real bad guy is, but there is a narrative explanation for this misdirection. In this film, there is no narrative explanation. This guy is just made to seem evil because the director keeps cutting to him. Very little of this can actually be called a plot, since it's just small things that happen in the background, or glimpses of people, or pointless misdirection that amounts to nothing in the end. The closest we get to it seeming like a plot is when we have the flashback, but even then, it's so isolated in a sea of nothing that it's hard to think much of it. So at this point, the review could be very short. I'm interested in films with rich and in-depth plots. This film does not have a plot. So that's that, right? Well, it could be, but since this film has nothing to offer, I'm just going to review the nothing. So away we go. Nothing Part 1, the Quidditch World Cup. Okay, so I actually lied. There is one thing that happens. The concept of a portkey is introduced, which will of course be reincorporated later. But aside from that, we have absolutely nothing. See, there are some people out there who are annoyed that we don't get to see the Quidditch World Cup match. These people represent everything wrong with modern cinema. See, what we have with this film is a whole load of mindless action set pieces that don't contribute anything meaningful to the plot of the film. And for a lot of people, their biggest criticism of the film is that there aren't enough mindless action set pieces that don't contribute anything meaningful to the plot of the film. Because what would watching two random teams play Quidditch actually contribute to the plot? Nothing. The answer is nothing. The only thing they could have done is advance the character of Crumb a bit, as happens in the book. But it's not worth the boredom of a whole action scene just to contribute one bit of characterization for a very minor character. Indeed, skipping the pointless action at the beginning was the best decision made in this entire film. If they'd have been consistent with skipping pointless action, then this film could have been much shorter and less boring. But one point, okay. So the Quidditch World Cup, surely every single person who played Quidditch went to wizarding school, right? And is it not true to say that Hogwarts is the only wizarding school in the British Isles? And I'm guessing it also caters to Irish students. The point I'm trying to make here is that your odds of playing for the national team are not that much lower than your odds of being selected to play for your house. To put it another way, Harry is one of only 4 British or Irish seekers of his generation, so that's not a massive talent pool. Anyway, so then the Quidditch World Cup gets attacked by Death Eaters, and Ron says that it happened right under their noses.
Happened right under their noses?
Which is the wrong idiom to use in this context. It was a full frontal attack. It wasn't like it was some kind of stealth mission. Also, why did Barty Crouch Jr. bother doing this? It seems like an unnecessary risk to attack a well-guarded Quidditch match, and if he would have been caught, the entire plan would have failed. Nothing Part 2, the Dragon Challenge. Okay, so we've established Harry is chosen for the Triwizard Tournament. We've also established that the film is not going to make why Harry was chosen a major part of its focus. Instead, we just get mindless action scenes. It's kind of laughable that this film talks about the eternal glory of winning the Triwizard Cup.
Eternal glory! That is what awaits the student who wins the Triwizard Tournament.
As if anybody is supposed to care. I honestly could not care less whether or not Harry wins a stupid tournament. He's fought a dark wizard and his servant several times in the past 3 films. It is very clear he will eventually defeat the dark wizard himself, but we're supposed to be invested in this pointless competition because of some supposed eternal glory. Words cannot describe how bored I was during this action scene. Reminder, none of this matters. If he fails, it doesn't matter. The only real cause for investment is that he could die, but it's hard to be invested in the possibility of him dying when the fact that he is even at risk of dying in the first place is totally farcical. Apparently they can't keep him from competing because of tradition. It's stupid. He could die, and if he did die, I wouldn't care, because dying due to a stupid tradition and the stupid people running a stupid school where you're unnecessarily fighting stupid dragons is just stupid. Not exciting, not scary, stupid. Also, this dragon did some pretty expensive damage to the school. Stupid tournament. I genuinely just wanted to skip this scene. Nothing Part 3, the Yule Ball. I'm not going to say that the Yule Ball isn't funny, because it obviously is, but it's still largely pointless. The scene with Hermione and Crumb would have worked better if Hermione was actually ugly to begin with, but nothing happens to advance the internal plot. Oh, hello ding ding ding. Hello stinker smell. There's some funny moments and there's some character moments which we'll talk about later, but the internal plot is not advanced at all. Nothing Part 4, the Mermaid Challenge. Harry helps Cedric out by telling him about the dragons, so Cedric instead tells Harry very cryptically to have a bath. And this is when it struck me. Cedric Diggory should be gay. And I don't mean J.K. Rowling retroactively revealing he's gay. I mean him very much making it clear that he is gay. Okay, so hear me out. Harry could kind of make a reference to Cho Chang, making it clear he was kind of into her, and then Cedric could be all like, to be honest, I'd have rather asked you. And then he could lock eyes with Harry and bite his lips slightly. And then he could be like,
it's not a bad place for a bath.
And it would just have so much more erotic tension. I mean, heck, Harry should be gay too. Imagine that. Just imagine for a second if they kissed. And like, you have this fantasy adventure thing going on, but the character is just gay. It doesn't matter that they're gay. They just are. It doesn't have to be some big deal. Just, oh, here's this boy who survived an evil wizard and will defeat him one day. Also, he's gay. No big deal. But even if Harry wasn't gay, Cedric definitely should have been gay. And then Dumbledore could kind of talk knowingly about Cedric in a later scene, maybe say something like, it's important to have a clear understanding of who you are, and to not be ashamed of it. it took me many years to admit to myself what Cedric confided in me. And then we'd be like, oh, Dumbledore's gay too. Now, having said that, if Harry is gay, Dumbledore shouldn't be gay. Basically, there should be 2 gays in this film, and one of them should be Cedric. That's what I'm saying. I hope we're all clear. Anyway, sorry about that. I got distracted by talking about how Cedric Diggory should be gay. I just want him to be gay so much. But, of course, they'd never reveal that Cedric is gay because that would be something interesting, and nothing interesting happens in this film. They find out it's mermaids, and Neville gives Harry something so he could breathe underwater. Again, we have another hilarious moment where Harry is worried that the gillyweed won't work.
Most likely.
Most likely?
Well, there is some debate among herbologists as to the effects of freshwater versus saltwater.
You're telling me this now?
It's hilarious because none of this matters. Nobody watching this should be sat on the edge of their seats thinking, oh, I hope Harry gets all the points he needs for the Triwizard Tournament. The Triwizard Tournament doesn't matter. And the fact that they're endangering the lives of innocent people is a joke. Like, what if this girl was just left under there? Would she have died? That's pretty dumb if that's the case. Either way, I must reiterate that what we are dealing with here is something that doesn't matter at all. And the only sense in which it does matter is because the people organising these events are idiots. Like, what if the gillyweed didn't work, and Harry jumped in and couldn't breathe? I guess he'd just swim to the platform and say, oh rats, I couldn't do it. And nothing of consequence would happen, unless we are to actually believe that Ron would have been left to drown, in which case, that's dumb. Nothing Part 5. The end. But you might say, oh, but Michael, all those stupid mindless action scenes did matter because it all leads up to the point where Harry and Cedric touch the portkey together and appear before Voldemort. Okay, it's basically an open secret that this twist at the end is the dumbest thing. Think of all the variables that had to be met just so Harry could touch the portkey at the end. The whole nothing of a plot was leading up to this total joke of a reveal. Now, I'm going to assume that they couldn't just turn Harry's bed into a portkey, but still, why not have the plot be about a MacGuffin, and then have the twist at the end be that the MacGuffin was a portkey, so we are actually invested in the plot. And then there's a twist at the end. For most of this film, the Triwizard Cup doesn't mean anything until right at the end with this twist. So fine, okay. When they have appeared in the graveyard, I was kind of interested, but that doesn't change the fact I was totally disinterested for 2 hours before that point. Okay, so that's the plot. Let's summarise. Most of the plot is nothing, because they're just waiting for the plot to happen around them. The tiny specks of plot throughout the film scarcely form any coherent narrative to get invested in, and then when it all comes to its climactic conclusion, it just seems really, really stupid. And that's why I'm giving it a 0 out of 10. If anything, I should rate this plot as not applicable, since there isn't a plot to rate in the first place. Anyway, let's talk about how this impacts the wider narrative. Fair warning, it isn't much better. So first of all, we have the standard relationship stuff. Ron and Harry fall out and it kind of doesn't matter. This conflict has very little preceding it in the previous 3 films and not too much following it up in the later films. Similarly, it doesn't tell us much about Harry. Harry makes it clear that he doesn't want fame.
Years from now, when we're old enough to be chosen.
Yeah, rather you than me.
Which makes it even more bizarre that this film acts as if the Triwizard Tournament matters. Maybe if Harry actually did indicate that he wanted eternal glory through this tournament, it would make the tournament slightly more interesting and make his beef with Ron slightly more impactful. As things stand, Ron just looks like an idiot getting upset over nothing, and Harry just looks like a perfectly humble person with no real character flaws, who Ron was wrong to criticise. Speaking of Harry being perfect, for some reason everybody hates Harry. Why everybody hates him isn't made totally clear, so it doesn't really inform us of anything about him. Also, people stop hating him suddenly for no reason. They start hating him out of nowhere, and stop hating him out of nowhere, so it doesn't matter. Hermione shows she has the hots for Krum. As I already said, this relationship is hindered by the fact that Hermione is attractive, so Krum being into her is not especially interesting, just a hot guy dating a hot girl. It also makes no sense why Ron would only ask Hermione as a last resort.
And not as a last resort!
The anger between Ron and Hermione kind of works because it hints at their eventual relationship, but that's really all there is that I can say that's positive about it. Also, we don't get any Dursley stuff, which I find to be thoroughly disappointing. Love watching them be dickheads and then get screwed over accordingly. Okay, so let's count down some things that actually happen that you might say impact the larger plot in a big way. First of all, we get introduced to Mad-Eye Moody, except of course we don't. It's easy to forget, but we have no idea who this person is. Imagine for a minute if tomorrow it turned out that I am an imposter, and really there's somebody who looks and sounds like me, but in terms of their beliefs and actions they are totally different. Would you say then that you know that person? No. Of course not. Yet, when Mad-Eye Moody next shows up, the films act as if we should know him, even though we've never seen this person before. We've seen somebody else pretending to be him, but we haven't seen him. I did enjoy the demonstration of the forbidden curses in their introduction. I also think it was neat how they introduced the fate of Neville Longbottom's parents, which of course does matter. The only problem is, As I mentioned previously, Avada Kedavra is a bad spell, because it means all the battles from this point onwards will just be reduced to people pointing their wands at each other. You might also say this film gets points for introducing and killing Cedric Diggory, which makes the series much more impactful now a student is dead. Now that scene of Cedric Diggory's dead body is certainly impactful, but it can't be ignored that if you remove this film entirely, it wouldn't make a difference, since nobody would know who Cedric Diggory was. He should have been introduced earlier, so it felt like he wasn't just included in this film to be killed. Also, he should have been gay. Now finally, you might say this film is indispensable to the wider narrative, because Voldemort is brought back, and that changes everything. But I have some problems. First of all, why is he a baby? Was he always a baby? I thought that he was some kind of incorporeal ghost. But anyway, I'd contend that Voldemort being brought back to full power isn't as indispensable to the wider plot as you might think. See, at the end of the third film, we see Pettigrew escape, and we can assume he will bring Voldemort back to power. In the fifth film, we see Harry having these dreams about Voldemort and his plans. So I can't help but wonder, what if you just skipped this film entirely and had the fifth film, which would now be the fourth film, be about Harry discovering that Voldemort has come back to power? And finally, by having Harry quite handily defeat Voldemort in their first ever confrontation, it kind of ruins him as a villain. I mean, Voldemort has just come back to full power, and the first thing he does is fail to kill a 14-year-old. If I were a Death Eater, I'd find that kind of awkward, like, better luck next time, Voldy. Third time's the charm. It really is kind of unforgivable. You've been teasing Voldemort coming back to power for 3 films now. Even with Voldemort at minimal power, he's still managed to cause some serious damage. But now he's at full power and Harry just points his wand at him and there are no worries. You've kind of just ruined the main villain. What would have made more sense is to have Cedric save Harry's life by sacrificing himself so Harry could escape. Voldemort doesn't even get a confirmed kill. Pettigrew does. Voldemort should just be on the verge of killing Harry. Then Cedric saves the day, Harry runs away, and Voldemort kills Cedric. Or better yet, just don't make this film. It actually contributes very little to the wider Harry Potter narrative, and I think I'm being charitable when I give it a 1 out of 10. I'm only doing that because I guess Voldemort coming back to life is kind of important and there is some advancement of the dynamic between our main characters, but a lot of this film can just be skipped. So the internal plot of this film is non-existent. The contributions to the overarching narrative are virtually non-existent. Seems to me like this film might as well not exist. So yeah, it isn't good. Please do like and subscribe and comment and share. My next video will be about why Donald Trump won't win in 2020, so enjoy that. And of course, I will be doing a Order of the Phoenix review at some point, but I'm not making any promises as to when.
Do it! Just